The storm was so powerful that it threatened to capsize the ship. Like a scene out of Sefer Yonah, the captain of the ship goes to find this great rabbi Mekubal who's on the ship named Rav Avram ben Yaakov Sava. And he tells him that if he just wants him to pray as hard as he can to save everyone on the ship. And the rabbi agrees on a condition, though, that if they are saved, if he should happen to die at sea, he won't be cast overboard, but rather brought for proper burial in the nearest Jewish community port town. And indeed, that's exactly what happened. The davened, the storm abated, and sure enough, 2 days later, still in the Mediterranean, the rabbi passed away. He was brought to Verona, where he was given a proper Jewish burial with the entire Jewish community present. We know this story from the Chidah of Chaim Yosef David Azulai, who in his Sefer Shem HaGedolim tells us this exact story from his travel log, where he wrote about what happened here with Rav Avram ben Yaakov Sava. Now, by the time this story transpired in 1508, sadly, Rav Sava had already encountered so many miles of travel and so much suffering. He was born and worked in Castile. He was a student of Rav Yitzchak de Leon, one of the great Mekubalim of all time. And unfortunately, of course, 1492, he was part of those who were expelled from Spain. And he went to a town that was right near Porto in Portugal with his whole community. He was the rabbi of the community. And so, unfortunately, in 1497, when the Inquisition caught up with the community there, 2 of his own sons were kidnapped and forcibly converted to Christianity. He was imprisoned. He was the rabbi of the community. He suffered mightily. He was there for a period of time in prison. And he was able to somehow escape and to go to Fez, Morocco. But because of the crazy circumstance, he couldn't even take his manuscripts with him. They had been buried outside of Lisbon, somehow in under a tree. So when he was in Morocco, he started to rewrite all of his commentaries from memory. Eventually found his way over to the capital cities of the Imperium of the Ottoman Empire. He stayed there and he wrote the books again. And then he was on this ship. He was apparently moving to Italy when this happened. So I thought to share a short piece that he teaches about Parshat Vaetchanan, Shabbat Nachamu, that maybe each of us can take a little chizuk from this great soul who suffered so mightily in his own life and yet wrote these words. He asked, why is it that Parshat Vaetchanan begins with basically a prayer that didn't work? Here, Moshe Rabbeinu, we learn, petitioned Hashem. He tells us in the first person narrative, Vaetchanan el Hashem be'eti lemor, and I petitioned Hashem at this time, saying, and the petition was to please be allowed to go into Eretz Yisrael. And the answer essentially was no, you're not going to get to go. So why is that in the Torah? Says the Tzur Hamor, that was the name of his commentary. Rav Sava writes, "Lehorot lanu ma she'amru Chachamim zal." This is to teach us what the Chachamim teach in Masechet Brachot. Afilu cherev munachat al tzavro shel adam al yimana atzmo min harachim. Even if there's a sword on the neck of a person, they should not be prevented from seeking the mercy of Hashem. They should keep davening, even in such a circumstance. And so Moshe Rabbeinu, when he saw in the wake of 2 military victories, 2 nations that attacked the Jewish people, Sichon and Og, both of these kings were killed and their empires were overrun. And now Yoshua was being told to take the mantle of leadership as they were going in. That's what Hashem had charged Moshe Rabbeinu with doing right after this war. So Moshe thought, if Hashem started the campaign of conquest of Eretz Yisrael, maybe he's inviting me to at least ask one more time. And so he does. And what does Hashem basically say? Stop asking. But nonetheless, even though Moshe basically knew this intellectually, it didn't prevent him from davening more. He had accepted that this was already the decree that could not be overturned. He already gave this charge to Yoshua, just as Hashem did this, these 2 kings, and the conquest has essentially begun on the eastern side of the Jordan. When we move into Eretz Canaan proper, that's the land that was promised. That's what you're going to be successful. Don't worry. The Nira Mikan. It seems the fact that Moshe did this, says the right that Surah Amor, he already had despaired of getting in there. So nonetheless, in Kol Zeh, with all of that, he did not prevent himself from asking for compassion. And so he started trying again, even at this moment, even though he knew that it wasn't really going to work. But his thought process, according to Rav Sava, was the following: Im yo'il, yo'il. If it will be effective, it will be effective. There's always a chance. Im lo yo'il, if it doesn't work, nonetheless, at least future generations will take a lesson. They'll learn that they should actually pray even in times of great distress. Even if there was a terrible decree leveled against the Jewish people, we should still keep trying. That's what it means. Vaetchanan el Hashem ba'etahi le'mor. The word le'mor is extraneous here because the word le'mor generally is translated to English as saying. But actually, according to Chazal, the word le'mor means that it should be said. As in the pasuk, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe le'mor. It doesn't mean, and God spoke to Moshe saying. Why don't you say, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe? God spoke to Moshe and start speaking. Le'mor is telling Moshe, tell others. So here at the beginning of the Parsha, says the Tzor HaMor, Moshe Rabbeinu says, and I petitioned God at this time, and you should do the same. La'acherim, ulalamdam shiyasu kamohu, that others should do as he was doing. K'moshe Amar al pasuk, just like the pasuk, Vayidar Yaakov neder lemor. Yaakov, in a moment of great distress, takes an oath. And that oath has the word also lemor, because here, even as he was doing it for his own moment, he was instructing future generations about what they ought to do, what we ought to do. Now, it's true. Moshe Rabbeinu was not successful in coming into the land itself. However, Hashem did give Moshe Rabbeinu something else, thanks to his petition. He gave him an ability to see the land. That wasn't to make it tantalizing and make him feel bad. This is what you're not getting. But just having a vision of Tzion, even when one stands outside of Tzion, is itself a form of Nechama. And so Hashem told him, Alei Rosh HaPisgah, go up to the top of the hill. V'sa einecha yama v'tzafon v'teimanu u'mizracha u're'ei ve'einecha. Go up and see with your eyes all of the four winds, all of the cardinal points within the land of Israel. See it with your eyes. And it's true, Kilo ta'avor ha'yarden hazeh, for you will not cross over the Jordan. But in addition to that vision of Tzion and that longing, that will be communicated to the next generation. You will also have the benefit of the nachas, of knowing that you're passing the mantle to the next generation to complete the work that you were not able to complete. V'tzavet Yehoshua, v'chazkehu v'amtzehu. Command Yehoshua, strengthen him, and give him courage. Ki hu ya'avor lifnei ha'am hazeh. Moshe, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yehoshua bin Nun needs your chizuk. And even though you're not going to finish the journey, because your nechama is not going to be that you're going to get everything you want, you got something, a vision, and you transfer that vision as your legacy. You're also transferring to your inheritor, to the next generation, this part of your legacy, and give him chizuk, and give him ometz, strength and courage. Ki hu ya'avor lifnei ha'am hazeh. He will pass before this nation. He will cause them to inherit this land that you, Moshe, can see, the vision that you have. It's an interesting epilogue to the story, the sad story of Avram ben Yaakov Sava Zechuto Yagen Aleinu, that his granddaughter was married to Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, spoke about last week, who was part of that circle of those who were the visionaries, who from their perch in Tzfat in Eretz Yisrael had a vision of what it meant to be connected to Eretz Yisrael, to Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh, and of course, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He wrote on that on Parshat Vaetchanan, a parsha which is the perfect parsha for right after Tisha B'Av. Aseret HaDibrot, Shema Yisrael, basics in Emunah, basics of Chizuk. And the beginning of the parsha, that Tzor HaMor teaches us, Rav Avram Sava teaches us, is about saying, keep on davening. And maybe you won't get what you're looking for, but maybe you'll be teaching someone else how important it is to keep the kesher with Hashem and to keep trying to ask for rachamim. Maybe they'll learn about the vision of Tzion, of that vision of Eretz Yisrael, even if you're not successful to be there yourself. And hopefully also you pass along chizuk and ometz, strength and courage, to somebody else. Wishing everyone Shabbat Shalom.